Are you a complete noob and you're basically using this key feature in SOLIDWORKS like this? There is so much more to learn with this function. If you want to learn a little bit more about how to use this function to facilitate your everyday engineering design work, let me help you. The extruded boss base function is probably one of the functions you're probably going to use the most. So it's a good idea to really understand how to use it and how to use it in a way that makes your designs more efficient and more reliable. So let's get familiarized with the different functions of this command. I have here a simple square sketch that I'm going to select and press extrude. Now, a lot of people are just going to know this basic function where they have blind and they put a value here. If it's the very first sketch you do in a file, most likely that's the only option you have. But let's look at the other features, starting with from. From is where your sketch is going to be extruded from. Here we only have this sketch on the top plane that I've drawn, and we don't have any other surfaces or bodies. So right now our only options are to boss extrude from sketch plane or offset. Imagine that we made our sketch on a plane, but we want the actual body to be extruded a distance from the plane. How do we do that? We don't have to extrude and then cut a piece of the body. Instead, we could just offset. And it's as easy as putting a value here. You see, right now it took 10 millimeters. It starts the extrusion 10 millimeters from the sketch. And of course, you could switch the directions. Same with the blind function. There is a way to switch the direction of extrusion. Next, if we're looking at direction 1, the default is blind. There are other options: up to vertex, up to surface, offset from surface, up to body, and midplane. Because this is the first sketch and feature in our file, I cannot do up to vertex, surface, offset from surface, up to body, because they're going to be referencing other shapes or items in the file which are yet to be made. I can do midplane. I always recommend, this is a hot tip, if you can help it, keep your parts symmetrical or about the planes that are already set at the origin. So if I wanted to make a box, I'm probably not gonna just do blind. Instead, I might do midplane, which means that it extrudes the same amount in 2 directions. And if I change this, it still keeps the plane exactly in the middle. Another option is to add a second direction. So let's say that I have my sketch and I'm blindly extruding on one side, and I wanted to extrude on the other side too, in the opposite direction, but not symmetrically. What can I do? I go to direction 2. Check that. Gives me the same options, you see, except the midplane, because assuming that we want the 2 sides not to be equal, we can't put blind and set them the same value. But that's basically the same as doing midplane in one direction. Just know that the 50 is the total extrusion height. So if we check, this is 50. It's not 50 in this direction. At least not in the boss extrude version. Now, what is this function? This is a function that most people don't know about or don't use. And it could be useful in times. I don't use it for every design, but sometimes it helps. Let's say that I'm fitting two parts with each other, and I want this part, which is going to be inserted in another part, I want to make sure that it enters well, that there's not much interference between the two pieces. What I can do is add a draft. So here I turn it on and it gives me the degrees. And the degrees is basically what angle it goes inwards. Here is a 1 degree, so it's very low. I could go higher, you see? And I will ensure that this enters the other object easily. I could also make it go outwards if I want. You could do it in both directions. And here you could choose what contour. Here we only have one. But if I had multiple contours in the sketch, we could choose particular ones. Now I want to show you another helpful feature called the thin feature. Now, because I've already extruded this and I reopened it to modify, I don't see a thin feature. Why? Because for some reason, once you exit out of the original extrusion menu, it doesn't show up. So I'm just going to delete. I have my sketch. Let's say I want to make a box. Just a simple box that's hollow on the inside. So I could think of two ways. For example, instead of sketching a second square, use offset. Bring up the extrude function. I'm just going to do blind for now. Making sure that I take the good contour. Right now, the outer is selected. So if I press, oh, let's look at what it looks inside. I'm going to do section view. See, it's completely filled. Now, if I switch to contour and do inside, doesn't matter if I do the line or actually the surface that's highlighting. Now it's this smaller filled rectangular prism. If I want a hollow cube or rectangle, I'm going to go through the long way, which is extrude. It automatically selected it for me in the space between the two sketch squares. But let's say it didn't. Say it had selected this one. I clear and hover until I see the region highlight. And I'm going to press OK. This is fine, but then I need to do the top and bottom surfaces if I want it to be a closed cube. How do I do that? I have to take another step. Just click on the sketch, extrude. Here, I'm going to clear, and I'm going to select the inner and the outer. And because I want to close the top and bottom, I'm going to do from surface. So this is us using the other features other than sketch plane. I could do sketch plane, but I'm going to use surface now just to show you that, for example, this one, which is not the same as the sketch plane. And I will extrude it the same amount as the thickness of the walls, which is 10. Instead of pressing OK, I'm going to make sure that merge is selected so it shows as one body. So you might think that I could use the second direction here to do the other side, but that's not really possible because it goes from the same surface. So you see there's one from and two directions. So if I do from the surface, that means the second one will also start from this surface, but in the opposite direction, which is not what I want. I want the second one to start from a different surface. So I'm going to press OK here. Now we got the upper part closing. And I'm going to, once again, click on the sketch. This time I'm going to do from sketch plane. Blind is fine, but I'm going to switch direction. I'm going to merge it, 10 millimeters still, and the outer are selected. Press OK. Now, moment of truth. Is this hollow? Yes, it is. You see? Only took 3-4 minutes or so. Maybe less. At best. But let's delete all this and let me show you how I could do it in 20 seconds. So we're going to start from the original sketch of just a square. Select extrude. It automatically extrudes it. I would like to do mid-plane and I want it to be 100 millimeters tall. Now I want it to be a cube, but that's hollowed. So I choose this thin feature. Perfect. Again, I have a few options. I could have one direction where it takes the contour and extrudes it outside or inside if I switch the direction. You could do mid-plane where the sketch is in the middle. And it could do two directions if I don't want them to be symmetrical. So you see here extrudes more on the inside than outside. I will do, that depends on what your function is. If my critical function is the inside of this cube, maybe I want to fit something in it, then I will choose this one direction one and put my thickness here. Now, if I do this, again, it's going to have no top and bottom, but I could go back and use the blind function, and this will give me a function of cap ends. If I click this, it automatically adds caps on both ends. And you could also choose the thickness. I'm going to keep it as 10. There you go. Now, I talked a lot, but normally that takes 15 seconds or less. Now let's say that we have this cube and I've made it solid inside. And let's say that we need to have a rod that enters halfway into this cube. I'm not going to use assembly mode for this, just to give you an idea of how capable the extruded boss base function is. So for me, I'm always trying to reduce the number of steps I need to create the final desired product. I'm going to use the same plane or use the surface, for example, to make this first step, but I'm going to use the top plane. I'm going to sketch my rod, at least a circle. Let's make it 50 and we're good. Let's say we want the rod to enter from the top. We do extrude. We know that we could have different from options. So here I could start from surface, for example, and click on the surface. See, this one extrudes from the surface up, or I could offset, and I have to manually put it, which I could give the height of this, or I could choose vertex, let's say this point, and it goes from that vertex too. Here it works because in 2D it can only go extrude in the perpendicular direction of the sketch plane. Here I'm gonna choose, it's already selected. I'm gonna do direction 1 blind because I don't have other references. And let's say I want the height to be 100, but in total. I'm gonna put 90, and I'll show you why in a second. So here I'm gonna put 50. Why? Because I want it to be inserted until half of the cube. If the total height is 100, then 50 will be out and 50 in. I'm not going to merge the result because they're two separate bodies. Now, I'm gonna do a second direction. I could do offset from surface. What that means is, for example, I know I want it to be 50 millimeters from their surface, or this because it's a symmetrical cube. But let's say I want to choose this. I put 50. You could see that it brings me halfway. I could reverse the offset and it brings it 50 on the other side. But in this case, I just need this way. This is an important distinction to make. Basically, what is my critical function of my piece? You always have to remember this question. What is the critical function of my piece? If my piece, the sizes change, is it more critical that the piece is always 50 millimeters from the bottom or 50 millimeters from the top? We have to determine what the critical function is. For example, in my case, maybe the critical function is that my rod, no matter the height of the cube, has to insert into the cube up to 50 milliliters from the bottom of the cube. So that would be this function. I do offset from the surface. My critical surface is the bottom of the cube, and my critical value is 50. In a different series, I'll show you how you could implement equations into these, where you could change the parameters really easily using a text file. That way, if your critical functions change, it could update the file automatically. If it's important for my piece to be able to insert easily, I could introduce a daft function, and let's say 2 millimeters. Now, let's take a sectional view. So we see that here we still have the cube because we didn't make any cuts into the cube. We only extruded. And then we have our rod, which right now is 50 plus 50, 100 milliliters long. But in real life, we know that this rod cannot enter the cube without there being a hole. So what do? I have to make a hole. And guess what? We don't need a different sketch for that. We could use the same one we already did and use the smart features that are available to us. Here we have extruded boss base. Here we have extruded cut. Exactly the same thing, except the reverse. Instead of making 3D materials from 2D sketches, this one removes material. So in this case, it's perfect. We need to make a hole. So I'm going to actually remove the sectional view. I'm going to select the sketch that is the circular one. I'm going to press extruded cut. Now, here we have the same functions where we have from and directions, then feature, selected contour. Here we have an extra function, which we'll talk about in a second. So here we have to choose what is a critical function. We want to make a hole where this rod is. So it goes in. The hole won't be on this side, it'll be on that side. So it's a good idea to start from this surface and go down. Now, what's the next section? We can put blind and put 50, but what if later in the design I change the height of the rod and only, let's say, 40 millimeters go in? This cut will be at 50 and my rod only going 40, so there'll be 1 millimeter space. And maybe in my design, I don't want that. I always try to avoid using blind function because it's just punching numbers, and if things ever change, you have to go and change the numbers manually. It's not fun, and it can lead to a lot of errors or forgotten pieces. to be changed. So here I have different options. I could do blind, which I will not if I have other choices. I could do through all. What does that mean? It means it goes through the whole material from one side to the other. Do I want that right now? No, because I don't want the hole to be completely through. I want it to stop 50 millimeters or stop at the end of this rod. I could have done through all where it takes any items in either direction of the surface or the sketch, whatever your from condition is, and remove it. If I press yes here, it will remove everything related to circle, you see? But I don't want that. So I'm gonna edit. Next option we have is up to next. So what does this do? This basically takes the from condition that you're given and extrudes until the next thing. Here, the next thing, because we've already put the rod, is the end of the rod. So it starts and goes until it sees that there's a change. Here we have a rod, then there's no rod, and it's the rest of the cube. So the next thing is the end of the rod. This is actually an interesting one we could use for sure. And I use this a lot. You could use this in the boss extrude when there's different bodies. I could use up to vertex. I don't use this that much. I usually prefer up to surface rather than up to vertex. Vertex maybe has a little more flexibility on direction, but for me, I don't think I've ever used it over up to surface. Again, I could offset from surface if I needed the hole to, let's say, end 10 millimeters from the bottom. I could do that. Decided that the hole is dependent on how far long the rod is. So it's not independent of the rod, but it's dependent on the rod. So I want to choose this option. I don't have other bodies that are relevant. And I could do mid-plane again alongside the blind option to be able to cut symmetrically on both sides of the surface. I could do up to surface, except I don't have the view of the end of the cylinder. So I could select view and section view, and then do this all over again. So from sketch plane or face, through all, up to surface, and try to select the surface. This will cut it. But attention, because I don't want to also cut the rod, because here if I do that, it'll cut the material from the rod and the cube. Well, technically there's no cube on this part. But instead, here it's on auto select, so let's see what it automatically chooses. No, you see, it's wrong. It doesn't know anything. Don't trust the automatic selection. Instead, I'm going to select the bodies myself. So here it did both. I'm going to select this. So I selected box extrude 7, which is the cube. And that means that the cut will only affect this shape. So let's see. I'm going to do OK. And if I hide this rod for a second, you see that I made the hole. If I show the body again, there we go. That's good. Do you see that? I hope you could see the point of why it's really, really important to choose relations between different surfaces, bodies, features, than just blindly, literally, blindly putting numbers. Because let's say right now, I want to change the height of this rod. Let's say I want to stick out 200. Because we extruded the first direction from the surface, the inside of the cube and how far it goes, it's not affected. It's very important that the rod is 15 millimeters into the cube from the top or the bottom, whatever the criteria is. I can make this rod as long as I want on the outside without affecting the inside. But let's say I do want to affect the inside. Let's say my criteria is starting from 10 millimeters from the bottom. I open up the feature and directly rebuild. And the part sticking out does not change. The rod is longer and just starts at the 10. Now, if we did it correctly, the cut we made based on the surface of the rod should automatically update. So we don't need to automatically change the depth of the hole if we have successfully linked it to the bottom surface of the rod. I hope it's making sense. Look, isn't that beautiful? Are you understanding the significance of this? Do you understand me? Remember that we put it up 2 degrees. And again, even you see, the angle stays the same, but the length increased. So if that's a critical parameter, it stays the same. Do you understand how significant this is? This is the simplest thing you could make right now. But imagine when you get to designing more complex pieces, you have to make relational connections between different parts. Why? Because if you ever need to change one, which if you're an engineer, you know that you're going to constantly make changes to your design. You don't want to have to remember to change every single other dimension that's related to that. Make relations and they will automatically update. But to do relations, you really need to know what are my critical parameters. Okay, I think I've rambled on about Extrude Boss and Extrude Cut, which is the simplest but probably the most important features that you're going to use. I hope that you found this useful because I don't want you to stay noobs. I want you level up. Level up. It's okay if we all start as noobs, but we need to find how to improve our design process. And that's what I'm constantly learning as I do more and more designs. It's a constant lesson on how to design better, how to save time better. Anyways, I'll be sure to share any other tips I learned across my trials and errors at work, just so you could avoid headaches if possible, which is not possible to avoid all, but it is what it is. It's the job. I hope you have a great day, and until next time.